you don't get last year's points. We are playing in windows. We are not projecting out for 17 games. How I approach trades, I'm always looking for a win-win. And I think that's how you get deals done better than any other thing.
On today's episode of the Pretend GM podcast, I spoke with John Daigle of Establish the Run. He talked to me about the biggest mistake that fantasy managers are making year after year, why best ball strategies and best ball brain doesn't really work for season-long football, and then how his fantasy football strategy has changed dramatically throughout the years. Just like you and me, John Daigle is a Pretend GM. Well, John Daigle, you have been in this industry for quite some time now. And like you've been, I mean, just from the Twitter bio alone, the research didn't go that far, but you had Established the Run right now, previously at NBC, Emmy and FSWA award winner, which is just impressive in itself. I have 0 awards unless we count 8th grade soccer. But dude, just your fantasy journey, it started so much longer before that. You've been through so many different stops. What's the moment? I think everyone has that kind of aha moment. You're like, oh, I'm actually kind of good at this. I could do this and make US currency and make a living out of this.
What's funny when you ask that question is, and maybe this is why I am viewed by others as, quote, being good at this, is because I genuinely don't feel that way at all. I wake up every morning and question, one, am I good at this? Let's start there. And so that's probably where the drive comes from, is to, and at least in my head, get good at this. But 2, I also ask, does anyone care? Like, does anyone recognize what I'm doing? And so I appreciate the compliment and asking me this question, but I honestly don't know if I've had it just yet. I will say the time when I realized people at least respected what I do is, and this is a long time ago, but I've done a lot behind the scenes coming into this industry. I didn't really, quote unquote, make it until I was 30 years old, 29 years old, whenever Evan Silva of Establish the Run reached out to me through Twitter. And I had never talked to him before, but by that time I was writing all over. I helped start up Fantasy Labs, which eventually got acquired by the Chernin Group. And I was working the NFL news side only with Adam Levitan, which is how we first met before I was at Roto World. And when he was there, and DraftKings commercials and DraftKings in general, DFS had just started exploding, and he latched onto that intelligently and started expanding his brand and himself. But the initial tweet from Evan Silva, the DM, was 1, call me, and 2, his number. And so anyone who came up and had initially began reading Evan Silva, who was basically my mentor, if you get that message, 1, it's not expected. It's 3 p.m. in LA at that time, but it was very, very, very shocking. Did not expect it at all. Now I hope he never messaged me, but back then it was kind of cool. And so I literally just called him and we talked for 30 minutes about my plans in life and what I'm trying to do. And by that time I had just, again, done so many things. So I think the obvious answer is Evan Silva reaching out to me and be like, okay, I can help you because you're working hard and I see you're just doing it wrong. So let me put you on the right track. I think really though, the other one way before that was I had previously helped someone out with a Dallas Cowboys blog. And I was getting paid just pennies under the table. I could walk out and afford a meal. That was good. And so I didn't mind it all. It was really just to start putting big names on my resume. And what happened eventually is a couple years later, as I'm doing this and I'm trying out new things too, I produced at one point, no one even probably remembers this, but I produced at one point the Monday Morning Quarterback podcast under Peter King's website. But wow. That podcast had Andy Benoit, Robert Mays, who's a friend, and Robert Klemko at the time. And I was their producer. I've done just so many things for free behind the scenes in the past, just trying to meet more people and have them understand what I do. Andy Benoit also is someone who we recognize each other at the combine every year and have some good conversations. I believe he still works with the Rams under Sean McVay behind the scenes. But the story is, long story longer, the person who ran the Cowboys blog eventually got hired to help Troy Aikman, be his underwriter.
Oh, wow.
and give Troy Aikman notes for at the time ESPN football games. And then Fox football games. And Fox then got the draft. They paid for the rights for the NFL draft for the first time ever. And so Aikman now was in charge of talking about AFC teams, and he had never done that since Fox only did NFC. And so this one guy then said, hey, I can't do that since I'm helping you write notes for the NFC, but I think I know a guy who can. So he sent me Troy Aikman's email and phone number. And like he looped us together and be like, hey, John can help you out. What do you need? Aikman sent an email back saying, I just need 3 to 5 pages on every team, how they got here, like their draft history, what they did last year. I need to know what they're doing. I said, all right, I got you. I wrote like a 35 page report. Sent it to him. Didn't expect anything. Just thought, okay, as I'm building this free resume and just meeting people, now I can always say, hey, I worked with Troy Aikman at one point. That's all I need. But actually, what happened, like 2 weeks later, I still have this screenshot. And mind you, I'm like 23, 24 years old. So this is huge. But I have this screenshot where out of nowhere, it just says Troy Aikman PayPal'd you X amount. And it was amount that, especially at the time, when I'm just like grinding poker tables, because that's kind of how I came up after college. I didn't want a real job, and so I just did fantasy football at SB Nation part-time while also playing professional poker, going to like a casinos in Oklahoma since I was living in Texas then. And yeah, Troy Aikman just like had sent me what I believe was far too nice of an amount. And it's just cool to see that Troy Aikman paid you. So I think that's the time when I realized, okay, at least someone is respecting my work. And then, of course, I'm watching the draft, and he did use a lot of the notes that year. So yeah, I think that's the time.
Dude, that's okay. That's the best answer I've gotten from this question so far. Like, everyone always talks about maybe a DM they got or an opportunity they got to be on a show or write an article. Troy Aikman, like, sending you a PayPal. It's just like, hey, bud, thanks for this information. That's the coolest thing I've heard from this so far.
And by the way, Troy Aikman, just to let you know, would not remember me. And which is also why I never, if you see celebrities or whatever, football players outside of interviewing them, I don't even say hi, because they say hi to everyone. They don't care about plebe John Daigle. It doesn't matter to me at all. It's just cool to see them. Troy Aikman would not remember me. I obviously hold on to this memory to this day. Like if I text Chris Sims, he 100% would text back. Aikman would just block my number. So it's never going to happen, but I am going to keep his number for my own sake, just to say this is cool.
Honestly, it's the same. It feels like it's cool to think of the shared experience. So I started out actually right after college. I was an intern at a sports radio station where I got to be a producer behind the scenes. That was my first job coming out of college, becoming the producer over there. And because of that, I got to go out to a lunch with the host and Dan Marino, and we went and had lunch. It was like a whole conversation, cool thing, and never really heard from him or saw him again. I think it was maybe like 6 or 7 years later. And I see Dan Marino out at like the pharmacy. My wife's like, go talk to him. I bet he remembers you. I'm like, absolutely not. I'm not going to go, but like, that man's just living his life. But you just hold on to those experiences, because they're just like, they're going to be a core memory that stays with you forever.
Now, if it's someone I recognize and I truly, truly just like appreciate them or what they did for a time in my life, the two most memorable people most recently are, so CM Punk runs on my trail that I run on in Chicago, the 606. Cool. Usually has a hoodie on, but like if you watch wrestling, you know the tattoos and everything. And so one time we were like walking at the same time and like awkwardly passing, since I was a fast walker, and I literally just quickly glanced at him and said, hey, respect your work, and I kept on moving. That's it. I don't need you to respond to me. I don't need to say hi. Just, hey, love what you do. I'm on my way. You're too busy to talk to me. Yeah. And the other one was Sean Marion. I passed at a Cubs game, and I dapped him up because I'm from Dallas. I don't hold on to many of my teams anymore. My sports passions, having worked in every industry for so long, that now it's kind of gotten blurred out, and I cheer for all grown-ass men to get paid and feed their families now. So I don't really root for my teams anymore. But the 2010, 2011 Mavericks, I can still name the whole roster. They are so close to my heart, including Tyson Chandler and Dirk Nowitzki. So I know Sean Marion, and I literally just told him, hey, thank you for everything. It literally like shaped the way I view sports in general.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I think every sports fan kind of feels the same. There's always that one team or a handful of players.
One team or one player.
Yeah. Ever like for me, it's going to be the Dolphins and Ricky Williams, like watching him growing up. Like that was awesome. So you mentioned not only all these things behind the scenes, but you mentioned the poker stuff. And like, that makes me kind of wonder, does that have a big influence on, and does it shape the way maybe you play fantasy today? Or is there something else from your background that shapes the way you look at this game and the way you play it?
It definitely shapes the way I analyze fantasy football and understanding ranges of outcomes. And this is something I'm still trying to get better at every year. I still make many mistakes. Last year, for example, I got Saquon Barkley. I oddly thought it was great, and there's tape of this thought it was great to draft Saquon Barkley in the third round, but stupidly said the second round was way too expensive. I don't know how I came to that conclusion to be right and wrong, but I was right and wrong on Saquon Barkley last year and Ladd McConkey. I was wrong on him for redraft leagues. And so it's just then I have to go back to the seller and be like, what did I do wrong here? Ladd McConkey was simply just overanalyzing. So now I try not to do that even more with rookie prospects. Hey, this guy only played the slot. Can he play out wide? Maybe I should have just said Ladd McConkey is a baller. Sometimes it's literally that simple to be a meme and just say this guy is good at football. So yeah, I'm slowly getting better at everything. And I think poker definitely early on and the early stages of DFS, playing it even before like the big boom on DraftKings, I think it definitely helped shape my mind the way it is right now.
Well, another thing I've noticed, aside from all the stuff you've done maybe prior to fantasy football, is that you're kind of everywhere. I've seen you've done betting, you've done DFS, you've talked to rookies for the NFL draft, just regular NFL football, fantasy football. I know that they're all a little bit different, but I know there's also enough crossover. So have you found that there's an advantage to looking at so many different facets of the game when it comes to maybe fantasy football in particular?
Well, everything we do, it all trickles down in some kind of way. It's just a matter of changing the context to both your subject and the audience you're speaking to, and then also zooming out and asking yourself what game are you playing. For example, DFS, especially like come to Sunday morning and I'm changing up lineups, it's harder like the more work you do because you do all this work, you have all the matchups ready to go for season-long leagues and betting, and then now you're in DFS and really the whole point is, well, everyone's playing it that way. So I actually have to go against my own analysis and be like, what if this happens though? And so it's a lot of zooming out. It's honestly too much. My brain shouldn't try to do this. And I think that's why a lot of people don't do it, because it's probably best to stay in one lane and be very good at something. But it goes back to, I think, to just how I came up in the industry, was doing everything and wearing many hats, including editing audio and video, which I'll still do on my own Twitter clips from time to time. No one at ETR cuts that up for me. I just kind of edit everything myself. And I don't mind it because I have that skill. So I like wearing a lot of hats, but again, it's just a matter of always zooming out and then understanding what you're talking about, which I feel like I do a good job at least with some things. But betting also, it can be completely different than what I'm explaining in terms of matchup wise. So yeah, every single subject, you just have to always remember to provide the correct context to that subject.
Do you have a favorite that you gravitate to like the most out of all of it?
I actually do enjoy week-to-week matchups and the matchups I write at Establish the Run and just analyzing season-long stuff, because as we're talking now, it's the game of strategic drafting, and that anyone can do that, honestly, like view and create something and view something from 3 months out and carry it over for 3 months. But I think it takes a certain type of brain to change your opinion and just go with the flow every single week and have a different opinion every single week, the more information we receive. And I love that. I love grinding. I love being in the weeds. It makes the time go by faster. Ask me if the time still go by fast at Christmas, whenever there's like, Friday and Saturday games. I'm probably going to complain and not say that. But yeah, I actually do love the week-to-week grind. But I also think it's because, as someone who like naturally gravitates towards contrarianism, you look around and not many people do the week-to-week grind. People are talking about their best ball teams in December. And like, what matters less than your best ball team in December? Like, who cares? You literally can't change anything. So why do I care about your best ball team at all? Whereas there's week-to-week games to play here. So the fact that less people do it, because it is a lot of work, I think is why I'm so attracted to still being in those weeds and in the trenches of warfare, at least our nerdy warfare.
Oh, I mean, you mentioned the best ball. And the best ball is almost kind of like just being a GM. You've picked your players and that's it. You kind of just like, let's see how the team does. With fantasy, even DFS, to an extent, like you're GM and coach. You're having to make sure you have a different approach every single week. And so staying in the weeds, like I get that 100%. And you mentioned earlier meeting a celebrity like Sean Marion, right? Like changes the way you watched basketball and enjoyed the sport. Has there been someone along the way, I'm sure with your history and all the different places you've been, the people you record with or work with, that has made you change the way you think about the game? I know I'm sure there's a lot of people that are great inspirations, but who has really challenged the way you think about the game?
Gosh, everyone I come across, honestly. It started with fantasy douche at RotoViz, which I know a lot of people don't know, but there was a time that the CEO of RotoViz, way back in the day, had guys like who everyone knows now: JJ Zacharyson, Rich Rebar, Ben Gretsch, Sean Siegel. The list goes on, and he would write email threads about how to write and how to think about fantasy football, and even in like how he explained to appropriately use M dashes, he would always make it philosophical, and you'd learn something completely new from it. Not just how to use proper grammar, but also just how to like view players and communicate your views better. I actually stole and I kept some of the threads long ago. I think it was Gretsch or Rich that finally found one from way back in the day and sent it to me. So I still have it archived in my own personal email because it's just cool to go back and look at that stuff. So I think it all started with Fantasy Douche. And then as we go along, we all read the same people and they all teach us different things. Then you kind of find your voice along the way. So JJ, Rich, all these, Evan Silva, of course, all these guys who are now like, I consider my very good friends, if not best friends, they also shape the way I view and analyze the game. I think the most recent one is Drew Dinkmeyer, who pretty much runs the NBA and DFS product with Mike Leone at ETR. But Dink is really the brains of it in that he takes the analysis, he can listen to it all, but the best, again, just ignore 99% of it and then ask, what do I win when I win? Like, how can I actually get an edge on this field despite the fact that I think their views are correct, but I need to turn their views against them? And so that's the way I kind of look at everything now. Dink has taught me a lot, and I still learn from him all the time. I think that's the most recent name.
You mentioned a lot of really smart names in that bunch. I know for me, like one of the guys that was huge, and I can't wait to have him on the show, was JJ Zacharyson.
Yep.
I started just podcast, I was a late bloomer in the fantasy field, so to speak. Like I started doing this at 31 and started doing the pod. Reached out to JJ. He was so gracious to come on, and then he had me go on his podcast. And it's just like there are people that you meet in this industry that just change the way not only you're going to pursue fantasy football, but just the way you think about this game. I can't imagine what it's like having that many just smart people around you. That's not a knock on the people that are around me. I love you guys.
Rich is, and he'll tell you the same thing. He's literally like an older brother to me now. We're so close. I'm close with his family. We've done like family vacations in the past where it's just his family and me. Like I'm the like seventh wheel among everyone. But having said that, and I think everyone will now hear this when I talk, not that it's nearly the same. Rich is still the very best at analyzing numbers and what he does. But when I was coming up, the first time I heard Rich talk, I thought that's how I want to speak when I'm on podcast. No empty words, especially when it comes to in season. And we have 45 minutes. Like right now it's July. We're getting to know each other. This is, again, the equivalent of Conan needs a friend. It's Alfredo needs a friend. And so, but in the in season, there is no empty space. You got to always like explain your point and communicate that. And Rich, to me, always does that. No empty space, no empty words. He tells you exactly what he believes and why he believes it. And that's the way I analyze fantasy football as well now.
You mentioned that's how you analyze fantasy football now. You sort of earlier mentioned sometimes you just pick the good players. And I think there's sort of a purity that comes.
Players.
You should, right? Like, yeah, good players, good teams. Who knew? That's the cheat code. Yeah. But I think there's almost a purity as to how we approach this game when we first start playing versus where we are 5, 10, 20 years later. And we start to look at it in so many different ways. You grow, you change. If you could rewind to the very first time you start playing fantasy football, what's the biggest difference between how that version of John Daigle looked at the game versus this version?
What was even the first players I had? Priest Holmes was definitely one of them because I loved the way he strafed over the sideline when he scored a touchdown for the Chiefs. And also back then, remember, we were using showing up on Monday with a newspaper as a commissioner, like in my junior high or high school. The principal was in our first fantasy football league as well. He didn't pay his $10 either. And I still know that man. He still owes us money. But I would literally show up with a newspaper, and this is what a lot of people tell back in the day too, the stories they tell. You then manually charted the points, and on a notepad, you just passed it around in between classes in the hallway for everyone to confirm their points that it looks correct. Now, obviously, the game has changed a lot. So what did I do then that I do now? What I do now is definitely a lot more complex and a lot more intelligent than what I did in the past. I don't think there was anything intelligent what I was doing in the past, honestly. Those first couple of years, it was more gravitating towards players we thought were explosive and players I liked. But now I understand, as a lot of people do, tier drafting and when cliffs happen, whenever running backs start drying up, to then pretty much look for pass catching running backs, to instead look at players who did really, really well and ask yourself why they did so well and make sure that wasn't a fluke. There are lots of players like that this year, but that's kind of the first things I do whenever I come into fantasy football now. I begin the year looking at, okay, who had a great year with everything going right and still didn't change the game at all. And that's this year, by the way, it's Jared Goff. Like, to be the QB9 in points per game and have career highs, you didn't make an impact whatsoever. I can find your replacement easily in fantasy football, what we do. So yeah, I think that's what I begin looking at. Whereas in the past, gosh, what did I look at? I think I just read like Andy Barnes and Matthew Berry, honestly, so yeah, it's gotten a lot more complex than back then.
You mentioned in that discussion there, like talking about how you approach drafts now, right? And where it's like, oh, maybe there's a part here where running back falls off. Let me shift my focus and the way I'm strategically doing this. If I had to get a quote from you, let's say this is going to be the quote for the thumbnail, right, of this YouTube episode. Does John Daigle have a sort of golden rule of fantasy football that you like to live by?
The one line I use most often when talking to people is, you don't get last year's points. And so let's just put that on the thumbnail because that's the rule of fantasy football. Even though everyone starts with that, you do not get last year's points. We are playing a different game this year, and everyone forgets that. So that's pretty much my golden rule is again, that actually speaks to what I just talked about, is making sure that I'm not chasing last year or asking myself, why did this happen last year? So yeah, you're not getting those points. They don't carry over unless you're in a last year league.
So people love to do that, right? They love to think of how things went last year. On top of that, they'll even look at the greater data points, even just there's concepts sometimes that people misconstrue, or they maybe give it too much weight going into the new season. What is one concept or data point that you find that fantasy analysts or even just fantasy managers maybe tend to misunderstand or overrate when they're looking at their teams?
I think we all notice when stats are used inappropriately. And all it really comes down to, I'm not sure there's anything that's really misunderstood or overrated, but a lot of stats are used without context and explaining. And that's pretty much when I look up and I see something, I'm like, that's not correct. Just because also you need to add more to that. That's the one thing. There is no skeleton key here. If there is a skeleton key, it's touches, but we still have to project for touches. And then also we make mistakes a lot of the time, a lot of people do, in thinking you're going to get those touches for 17 games when fantasy football is just a game of windows. Like, you're playing this thing 3 or 4 weeks at a time, which is why the waiver wire and everything is so important. So no, I don't know if there's anything that really people misunderstand or overrate. I really just think it's about, you have to make sure you always use context to the stat you're using. If there is like a bad stat you're asking me, we tend to, so wrestling, not to always bring it back to wrestling and CM Punk, but
I don't mind.
But the golden rule of wrestling, everyone knows, like in storylines, you can't come back until 7 years later. You cannot use the same storyline. You have to wait 7 years. That's the unwritten rule, 7 years. And so it does seem like we're in a cycle, but it's more like a 3 to 4 year cycle where everyone forgets that we already negated this stat. Like, we shunned it and said, this actually, it doesn't matter at all for what we're doing. So why would we even talk about it? This year it's ESPN Open Score. Like, we've already done this with yards per separation with NFL Next Gen Stats, where we said, yeah, I mean, you can cite it if you want, but it literally doesn't matter for fantasy football whatsoever. Like, we've run the R squared, we've done everything. It does not serve a purpose. And that's all ESPN Open Score is, the same thing. And yet people are still using it. It's like, why are we using it? We've done this already. I think a lot of people forget that we've done a lot of these things 3 years in a row. We seem, as a community in the fantasy, to finally have gone away, for the most part. Some people still use it. I'm not calling anyone out, but for the most part, gone away from this coach pass to the tight end 25% of the time. So now he's with this new team and he's going to pass to the tight end 25% of the time. Well, yeah, but that coach also had Rob Gronkowski and Travis Kelce.
Right.
So guess what? Of course he passed to the tight end. We seem for the most part to have gone away from that, even though it comes up from time to time. So I really just think it comes down to making sure whatever you're using, please provide the context why it's useful. Otherwise, we should all just ignore it and cancel you.
Well, I think so. Like, that's what happens though, is that people will take something out of context because it's either confirming a prior or it leans into their bias, right? And I've found that almost everybody, like even myself, like we all have some sort of bias, whether we realize it or not. And it's sometimes just the way you look at the game, right? It's like, I've heard I need to have a running quarterback. I only lean towards bigger wide receivers. I only lean towards younger running backs. Like, these are all things that I've heard here on the show. I know that context becomes important, but do you have some sort of bias where like maybe you get into a draft or you're looking at a trade and you're just like, I just tend to lean towards this type of player when making a decision?
It's pass catching running backs, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah. I try to make sure they stand out at the bottom of my tiers whenever there are a tier break, just because I understand that gives them multiple outs. I think the best example this year is Breece Hall for season long. So when I came into the offseason lower on Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis still there, it is going to be a run-heavy offense, and Justin Fields takes away carries. But at the same time, Breece Hall not only has gotten somewhat confident confirmation from his entire coaching staff that he's not getting traded and he's going to be the starter, but he's boasting a double-digit target share every year of his career so far. And so that kind of guy who we've seen like break the game and separate, like Devon Achane, except Breece Hall is much more cheaper this season. That's the kind of guy and the type of players I always look for and say I want to be higher on, even in the later rounds, because again, they can find different ways to provide production and stand out to their coaches.
Yeah, and I think that's just kind of like one of the things I mentioned him before, but JJ Zachariason, it's kind of like he told me like from the first time he came on the show is, man, just let yourself live in that gray area. Understand that you're going to be wrong a lot more often than you think. And even if you like you said with Breece Hall, you start out low on a guy, the more you look at this player, things are going to change and you're going to be able to learn new information. Perhaps even the situation around that player changes and you kind of have to, how does ADP fluctuate throughout the offseason? Cause I know you made the joke earlier about Saquon. Maybe you don't like him in the second, but you like him in the third. You know, sometimes Ridiculous. That happens. Ridiculous. Yeah. So that actually leads me to next thing here, because this is something that's kind of come up in conversation. You're going to be the first person that I asked this to is, when you get into a draft, right? How do you try to balance drafting for upside versus drafting for consistency? Because I know this is something that like friends in my home leagues and maybe the less experienced fantasy players, they'll always tell me, hey man, who's just going to get me like a good double-digit amount every week? I don't have to worry about them. I can just keep them plugged in. I don't know if that's always the right way to go about this, because you need to have those big pop-off weeks so that you can win. So how do you try to build a team while also, you know, compensating one side of upside, one side of consistency, that floor and ceiling together?
Although the term gets mundane, there are league winners every single year, and it's a matter of filtering your bench and finding them. And honestly, in season long, just because you have the ability to cut everyone if you need to, upside is honestly all that matters. At the same time, though, like you can't just say that outright, because if you're starting a team with only upside, you probably are losing because you need to pinpoint when they're hitting their upside as well. And so I think when you talk about consistency, it is guys in that quote unquote dead zone where it's Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Dave Montgomery, guys like that people don't want to draft, but they are weekly starters for however long they are healthy or until they lose their job. And so it's a hard thing to explain what to do. I think it really just comes with being able to mold yourself in drafts and go with the flow and follow the room and then go against the grain. But yes, I'm trying to target more upside than anything, understanding again, and I'll keep repeating this phrase because that's what season-long fantasy football is. That's what I do. Like, we are playing in windows. We are not projecting out for 17 games. We're trying to go week to week here, since again, we can always cut everyone. So, and pick up new players. So yeah, I do try to feature more upside, but I do understand that a lot of players have different qualities. And although they may not be in your week 14, 15 playoff lineups, it doesn't matter because they probably are serviceable right now.
I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like that for the thumbnail too. We're playing in Windows. That's a great philosophy, a way to look at this.
You got to jump out that window too when you're like, and sometimes it's hard, but you have to do it.
Yeah, one of the two of the guests that I've had on here have had such similar concepts where they even broke it down specifically. Where I know, like Jake Seeley says, like, don't waste your bench. People waste their bench going for safe players, right? And Heath Cummings just straight up said, "Listen, after round 6, I don't care about like the Wan'Dale Robinsons that are going to give you a high floor. I'm just shooting for all upside at that point." So I think that's an overarching theme here that audience members are hearing, is just get that upside for your bench, get that upside for the later parts of your drafts. And even when you're picking up off waiver wires as well. And I think what we do tend to see is kind of like how I mentioned, like one of my friends, he's always just looking for that consistency. And I keep telling him every year, you don't need that, bud. Like, that's not going to help you win. What's a big mistake that you see happening in fantasy leagues over and over, year after year?
That's definitely one. You should be, especially in home leagues, season-long leagues, you should be a lot more open to risk and attacking the ambiguous situations. Yes. Guys like Kyle Williams, Trey Harris, Bashal Tootin, those guys are going to go in the last couple of rounds of your home league. You should always take them on and just keep them stashed there just in case, because especially in your home leagues, people are going with the things they have seen before, even if like they're certain and the certainty means nothing. Like Kendrick Bourne is certain, but it means nothing to my team. You should always just go to the next thing. So yes, be much more open to risk and attacking ambiguous situations. That would be my suggestion that people should always do in their home leagues.
Would you say that's kind of how you also approach the waiver wire? If you just have an underperforming player, let's just cut our losses. Don't get into the sunk cost fallacy. Let's just go and find someone with some high upside out there.
I write a very complex waiver wire, and that my goal, Ian Hartitz always laughed at it at Roto World, because I told him my goal is to pretend as if you can't ask me a question. It's like, all right, if you're asking me a question, that means I need to address that question in this waiver wire. So I write as if I'm leaving you with no questions left. Thus, I will even tell people, like, I have this player ranked. It'll be in a blurb. I have this player ranked here. But if you're not going to start him this week, go to the next player. Go to number 3 and 4, because this player's next 2 matchups after this week are X and Y. And this is why X and Y are bad matchups, and you won't start this player. So I try to get as deep as possible. I also write for 16-team leagues that Establish the Run. I make sure everything is covered. Having said that, it can be confusing at times, because there are teams out there. And I sometimes I have these teams in fantasy where I need some desperation pickup, and otherwise you would never start this player. So it is how I handle the waiver wire. But honestly, I probably tried to balance way too much as opposed to going with one direction in the waiver wire. I address it all.
So I know when it comes to just adding players to your team, it's something that I know a lot of people, we almost get too desperate at times in the middle of the season. A team's like 0-3, and you're just, okay, I got to go spend 70% of my fab on this one player, or I got to make a move. And sometimes I see people that are just making moves because they're panicked, or making moves because they're bored almost. And it's like, I call it like getting the fantasy football empty calories. You're bored and you just want to do something. So you head to the pantry and you see like, hey, who can I trade with in my league? How do you actually decide when it's time to, okay, there's nothing on the waiver wire for me, let me see if I can find a trade worth pursuing? What's that process even like for you?
It's different from league to league. And I know some people who have been around the league in fantasy football and in this industry forever, and they'll still, even in industry leagues, I'm not going to, there's one person, I'm not going to say his name though, but they'll send some horrific trade, but they'll keep it coming. They'll be the guy in your dynasty league who will just pepper you with trades. And now I'm at the point of my life where I don't even answer you. Like, if it's a bad trade, this is not even a starting point. It's not worth me even clicking decline. I'm just going to leave it hanging because I know it pisses you off on the other side of the world. So how I approach trades, I'm always looking for a win-win. And I think that's how you get deals done better than any other thing. Don't try to lowball. Don't start with asking price or whatever. Just go for win-wins and say, look at the person's roster, say, just tell yourself, I know they need this, so they'll probably take this player. What do I need? That's why I also hate vetoes in leagues. You can have, like, if someone wants to have a podcast where, like, you only bring up trade, and I'm sure it probably even exists, but if you just want to put on, like, an old school gray judge wig and only bring up trades that have been vetoed, bring them to the podcast court and talk about them for like 30 minutes or whatever, it would be a good subject because there are trades that probably should be vetoed. But the option should still be removed entirely because you can't look at a trade just from the surface and understand both rosters. Like some people may be trading for rookies because they're so top heavy, they need to stack their bench. And if they're stacking their bench, it's going to naturally look a lot worse than getting starters immediately. And so that's why I hate vetoes.
Yeah, you have the same exact philosophy as Pat Fitzmaurice, who said almost the identical thing.
We're both so old and grumpy.
Well, I mean, it's like, I hate it every time someone's like, they'll send me a screenshot, and I'm doing a lot of this, like saying like friends that I've had since high school, college, that we do leagues and separate leagues, and they'll just be like, hey man, did I win this trade? I'm just like, sure, man, in a vacuum, maybe you won it, but like, we're not going to know until the season's over. Cause this guy you got like might go off week 13 when you need him most, and you need to get into the fantasy playoffs. Right. So like, that's something I know trades we're often looking at. Like I've heard the rule, like I always want to have the best player in a trade. Right. And I think sometimes we take that a little too far, not just in trades, but even when you're starting players, you're trying to figure out your lineup. It's like, well, I got to start my best players every single week because these are the players that got me here, or these are the names that I drafted highly. You know, this was my 4th or 5th round pick. How do you try to balance that? I know you've mentioned this multiple times that we play this in Windows. How do you balance that, making these decisions where you're like, okay, I got to start my quote stud versus actually I really just got to play the matchup, and this guy may not have the same name value, but he's got the better matchup this week?
It's definitely a week to week game. And I think you probably should in the first 2-3 weeks lean towards starting your studs just because we don't have enough information yet to make accurate decisions. And so we're still going off all the research and analysis we did during the offseason and why we like these players to begin with. So I would never say that term after the first month of the season. Within the first month, I'm definitely more prone to begin starting my studs. Having said that, as we get more information, like the most recent example is Malik Neighbors at the end of the year, where like for a month and a half, 2 months, he was getting double-digit targets per game, but they were XFL targets. Like they didn't matter. Yeah. He was still a wide receiver 3 or 4, and Malik Neighbors is a stud. But again, you could replicate even better production than wide receiver 3 or 4 on the waiver wire at times, honestly, but probably on your bench. And so that's when I say when we're at that point of the year and all these weeks stacked up and we understand his targets are inaccurate, thus they do not look like the 13 per game that he's getting, then we can say stud, but I can find better than this. And so then I'll bench the stud. And that's at the end of the year when we have more information. And by the way, when Drew Lock entered a week 17, when everyone was already out of the playoffs with Malik Neighbors, he scorched the world. So maybe we all know nothing anyways.
Yeah, every year it's like we get into the fantasy playoffs and we're talking about, hey, you got to start Ty Chandler this week because he's got some opportunity, you know, like it's just, we always end up going into these names that we're not the quote studs at the beginning of the year. That's just how fantasy football ends up going. So I think we see this a lot, right? There's always at the end of the year, we'll see what I learned from the fantasy season, or some people just like aren't even good about like being able to just admit when they've been wrong about something. And like, I think as an industry have gotten better about that. Like, hey, I was wrong about this. If you're wrong about a player, what's the process like going back and figuring out why you missed, and how does it shape future decisions for you?
And like I mentioned, Lab McConkey earlier, it was just over analysis. I needed to get out of my own way. And so I've gotten better at that. I think the big one for me was, maybe there's an example before this, but the one I recall was Mike Davis with the Falcons. And I wasn't necessarily even above market. Maybe I was overweight on Mike Davis. I'd have to go back and look at those Roto World tiers and rankings. But
what a time to be alive. It was just pictures of quads going all over the internet.
Yeah, that was it. That was AJ Dillon's rookie year, I think, too. But Mike Davis, though, was a running back who had never handled, going back to college, a large workload, but suddenly the roster portrayed as if he was going to handle a large workload. And so we were all just chasing the touches. Not a lot of people who already learned their lesson the hard way. What's another example? Chase Edmonds with the Dolphins. Or did he come after?
Yes.
Did he come after? I think he came after that. Okay. So I learned, let's say I learned the hard lesson through Mike Davis, drafting him, and then realizing, oh, he never handled a large workload at any point of his career. Why was I ever going to think he was going to do it now? Then Chase Edmonds comes along with Dolphins. Everyone's higher on him. And it's like, oh, well, these people didn't learn their lesson from Mike Davis. Let them learn the hard way with Chase Edmonds. Then, like last year, for example, Samir White and Raheem Mostert come along. And it's like, well, people didn't learn their lesson with Chase Edmonds and Mike Davis, so let them learn their hard way with Zamir White. And so, yeah, I think that you have to just keep remembering that you already learned this lesson. Why would you not use it the following year and the following years after that? So, yeah, that's the most recent one that I look back and I was just analyzing. Didn't know how to do it. And now, okay, I can take that lesson, and we're trying to learn something new literally every year. And like I said, most recently, Ladd McConkey, that was the lesson. It's like, hey, you have all this information, but you didn't ignore the correct part. So yeah, we're trying to get better every year.
It's like a nightmare highlight reel that you just gave me there. I started thinking of like Alexander Madison and a bunch of these other running backs.
Oh yeah, they all came in a row actually. So yeah, Mike Davis, learn your lesson. Chase Edmonds, Alexander Madison, Zamir White. Like you just gotta. Those are the easiest guys to fade now.
Yeah, man. Oh, I feel like we just don't learn our lessons.
I just gave you PTSD.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like it's just totally derailed me. Okay, so we've talked about like how you started in this industry, the way you look at the game. And I think that, as you've mentioned, the game has changed significantly over the years and it changes every season. One of the things that I keep seeing more and more, and this is from both sides, right? This is either from an industry standpoint or even just from players that are trying to, fantasy managers, excuse me, that are trying to play the game, is AI is being used more, and it's becoming this like hot button issue where like some people are just like, I really don't want to be around it. Some people are like, hey, it's the future. We've got to embrace it. I find myself still very much on the fence. Like I started this off by just saying like, watch one movie, people. Like I'm begging you, and you'll feel the same way I do. And like, there's times where I've seen like, okay, it has its uses. Have you found that you use AI, for artificial intelligence, for anything in fantasy football, or do you see a good use for it amongst consumers in fantasy football?
People should watch Ex Machina. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
Okay, well, if that's how you pronounce it, it's a great movie. But also, when we say great, it's horrifically terrifying.
Yeah,
it'll leave you shaking,
a little depressing,
and away. And like now, even I will. Do you use the webcam closer, like so your camera doesn't stay open?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I use it too because I'm terrified of computers. I'm just now, I think everyone's being watched at all times, even though everyone, like the technology knows where we're at all times. There's no more running and hiding anymore. I still try to do my best to cover up my tracks. Having said that, AI is an open space right now, and that we don't know. And we were asked this question, myself, CEO, co-founders of Established to Run, Taylor Cabey and Evan Silva. We all just did a panel at FSGA last week in Chicago here at the West End downtown. It was great, open Q&A. It was fun to get up there and talk to everybody. But we were asked about AI, and our answer was, we just don't know. We're even toying with an ETR. One time we put out a altered thumbnail where we literally just altered Stephon Diggs' face to show him like frowning because we were fading him. And people, the comments were unbelievable because everyone's scared. Like AI is coming for your job. That is the initial reaction. And obviously we don't want that. So we've done away with that already. But myself personally, I will use AI to help me research projects that otherwise in the past manually would have taken me days to do. For example, like I just created a model where I dragged in all of Fantasy Pros ADP for the last decade, and then the points per game results. That way I could tell myself or use for content coming up over the next couple of months. Oh, well, like this 8th round running back, like in the 803 spot, historically over the last decade, if you drafted him, should have been at this points per game for his career. But this player is actually higher or lower. If I had to do that manually, I could have done it, but it would have taken a lot longer through Excel and bad formulas. AI allowed me to do that in mere hours. So I think it definitely helps shorten and give us more freedom and time. But then what does it become after that? Man, this is the same answer you have. I don't know. I really do not know.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep an open mind because all I hear is like, oh, AI is not going to take your job, but someone that knows how to use it's going to take your job. And I'm just like, Okay, I'm just trying to keep as open mind as possible, like understand how it all works and everything. But
Trying to keep an
there's
open
just
mind, but then every time you log on social media, you see a robot like in a canoe rowing up a river. You're like, yep,
yeah,
we're done. We're
yeah, no,
totally done
we're
for.
totally cooked. Like the
Yeah.
robot dogs. Oh, did you see like the thing the other day where they're trying to knock over one of the little robots and they're showing its stability while it's still running? And I'm just like, yeah, we're done.
We gotta
We're
send them to Philly. Have you heard of the story? Have you heard of the story of the robot that ran across the country?
oh my gosh, no.
So someone's gonna have to double check me here and like tweet me the article. But there is a story where they did create a robot that would cross the country, like a peaceful robot saying, "Hey,
Like
this
a
is
Forrest
what."
Gump robot that's
Yes,
just gonna
this is
jog
what
across the country.
this is what they can do. Like they can get this far. Like we can build lasting creations now with this material. And it started, gosh, was it the other side of Canada, like Ontario, LA, somewhere around there? But it did cross the country. It went all the way across. It got to Philly, and then overnight, its head was found on a bench because, of course, like Philly was having none of it. So just
None
know,
of that.
whenever AI begins taking us over, we're sending them all to Philly.
See, all they showed us is that the AI has great cardio, and we're all
Yeah.
doomed. Like that's it.
That's unless we join forces with Philadelphia fans. Yeah.
Philly fans, man, thank you for being who you are. I guess you're gonna be the hope for the future.
That's
Uh,
amazing.
so like I know we've seen so many changes in the fantasy football space, in fantasy football leagues, but what's just one thing you wish you could see more? I think there's so many bright spots in fantasy football and in what we do that sometimes get overlooked. Like, what's one thing you wish you could see more of?
I understand the growth of best ball and why it's happening. There are absolute sick-minded people out there who want to talk about and draft football teams every month of the year. That's okay. I still appreciate stepping away for a month or two because we all need to refresh, I feel like, before getting back in the weeds. But everyone can handle it to their own mental health and accord. That's okay. Having said that, I worry a little bit looking from the outside in that it's the same thing what happened with the poker scene and sports betting, and that is best ball. What is being most advertised right now is the lotteries. And I want more winnable contest. Like, yes, there is absolutely still skill involved. Perhaps we're even early to best ball, but I do think we should have much more smaller fields that are accessible to people as opposed to only advertising and telling them about these lotteries with 150 lineups, because just like what happened with DFS, where then that got so popular and they broke everything into showdown and single game slates that the rake is terrible, but people still love playing them because, again, they offer 1.5 million or whatever to first place. That's the direction it seems like best ball's going, where we're only paying the rake. And I do not want that. So I would say I want content and small fields for that content and best ball before we get in our own way.
That's something that I've noticed too with best ball is like, yes, it's been growing. I think I'm just seeing more and more people losing more often than not. And I also
I
have
think it's
noticed
growing
how
in the
much
wrong way, unfortunately. Yeah.
I've seen them like, I hate to say it because it almost sounds pejorative when I say it, but like there's almost been sort of a best ball brain rot that I see that kind of carries over into other facets of like taking the best ball strategies and applying them to just general fantasy football. And that doesn't always work the same.
Oh, it's not only doesn't it not work the same, it's horrible. It's like
Yeah.
the last 3 years, especially. I went on JJ's show, by the way, a few weeks ago and talked about this. The last 3 years, especially, but now even more so because it gets more intense every year. Best ball ADP is quite literally completely useless for season long. Completely useless.
I don't know why we keep it in consensus ADPs.
Right.
I just don't, man.
It's on us, Alfredo. It's on us to keep on telling everyone that yes, like we're doing something different. The game respects game, but we also, again, always have to provide context.
Yeah. Yeah. Context. Big theme of this show here. So, okay. John Daigle, you are 98 years old. You're hanging up your mic and headphones.
Mm-hmm.
You're retiring from fantasy football content. What is it that you want the people to remember about you, that you want to be known for when they say, yeah, John Daigle, that guy?
There are a lot of quotes and mantras I walk around with in my head all the time. Inspiration is perishable is one of them. I don't want to be remembered for that though. I will say my favorite one I always think about is this is like the third reference to Conan O'Brien, as if he like shaped my life somehow. I did watch all of his shows, but whenever he had his last show with TBS, which was like an outing where they were pushing him out, not his choice at all. He still, on his very last show, came out, and the last words he said were, I don't think it's verbatim, but it's very close if not. The last quote he said was, just remember, be kind and don't burn bridges. And that was it. And I think that's how I want to be remembered, is be kind and do not burn bridges, and life will work itself out for you.
We need more of that. Like, we absolutely just need more of that, of people that are willing to be kind. I think there's somewhere along the line, everyone just kind of got really competitive with one another. And it became a thing where it's like one person tweeted something and that's it. I'm done with that guy. And we definitely need a little bit more kindness, even within like own leagues and stuff like that. I see people dropping out of fantasy leagues and that breaking up all the time.
Gosh, imagine that too. Losing, and I know it happens, but losing a friend over fantasy football. That's also why I think it's very easy to carry ourselves without any amount of seriousness. We take our job serious, but we don't take ourselves serious, because just step away and think about it. All we're doing is talking about football. Like, no one should have a bravado if they're talking about football. Even if they're hosting NBC, ESPN, whatever, like, dude, you're talking about football. Who cares?
It's a game about a game.
Yeah.
Like it should just be fun. One of my favorite quotes I heard was, like, if I'm feeling down or like just having a rough day and it's like, oh, what, are you having a hard time living out your dream? Like, you get to have a really fun job and do something really cool.
I think about that every time I see the NFL schedule and Black Friday games and everything. It's like, all right, just remember, you wanted to do this. Like, you chased this for 30 years of life. There's no going back now. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to be grateful. I think we also have so many people around us that have made the experience great. And I got some little mailbag questions here for you. I want to rapid fire here at the end of this. And so
sure.
I got Jeremy, who is the fantasy football moderator over on Reddit. And he asked, how did living with Silva impact your fantasy football analysis / process? And how did it impact your overall life? That's a loaded question.
So for those that don't know, during the pandemic, I was mentally unstable because I was living at Stamford, Connecticut for NBC, and I'd moved there for my job, but everyone that I considered a friend had gone away or had like families and living in New York. So I was on my own. Even like Josh Norris went back to Charlotte with his family. No one was there. So I was just stuck there working from home in a pandemic where we didn't understand anything that was going on with COVID. So at times for like a month, I was even scared to step outside because, again, we had no information or knowledge at that time.
Yeah.
And so it was bad. It was very, very bad. And I got scared, like maybe I wasn't going to be around too much longer. So I said, okay, I have to change this. Thus, I canceled my lease and I picked up and said, NBC's, they're not letting in the studio anymore. That's okay. I'm working from home entirely. So I'm just going to be a nomad and go around the country. So I set off from Connecticut to Traverse City in Michigan. I was just going to go live in wine and golfing country for a while in a cabin. And my first stop was in Chicago to see Silva, who we had never... No, we met one time at that point. We really didn't know too much about each other, though. We were still getting to know each other. And I stopped for a couple days. A couple days became a week became a couple weeks, and then it becomes quite literally like over a year we lived with each other. Where he just bought a new house. I had the top floor. He had the bottom floor. He slept in the basement. I don't know why that was. I just don't think he was thinking about it. And it was exactly as you think during a pandemic, where we would be up till... Like, we'd wake up, we'd go out for breakfast with each other to restaurants, or I'd cook, but restaurants that like weren't closed due to COVID because they refused to close. We go get breakfast, we come back, we do work and shows, we go out to like a bar, talk about football, come back, do work till 2 or 3 in the morning, and then go to bed, wake up at 7 or 8, and do the same routine every day like that for an entire year. It was absolutely insane. So much so that probably like a year after, you could ask him this too. Like, we honestly didn't talk I just think we got sick of each other, which is sad considering he's one of my best friends.
Yeah.
But honestly, like we needed a lot of space from each other. When
it became a loveless marriage at some point.
And that's why people call us a married couple, because it truly was. And you'll still see that tendency, like at the panel, I'm still like antagonizing him or making him laugh or just annoying him on purpose because I know I can rile him up. But yeah, it truly is a marriage between us. And so, I mean, I learned a lot of things about his process, about his life. I mean, I learned so much, but also, yeah, we got sick of each other for sure. Luckily, we're on very good standing now where I talk or see him at least once a day. Honestly, we've returned to our healthy relationship. But how did it impact like my process and my overall life? Yeah, it did a whole lot for a lot of different reasons. But he taught me a lot for sure.
You mentioned earlier you like to cook. Now you mentioned that sometimes for breakfast you'll cook. What's the go-to meal?
My best dish, I tell everyone, I will make a sweet potato gnocchi from scratch with sage and brown butter. But also, being Texan, like you come out the womb and ribs are in your blood. So like I can smoke ribs, I feel like, with my own barbecue sauce with the best of them.
That's awesome. I tried to do some cooking during COVID. It didn't work out.
And so I was like that. God, I'd have to string together the actual tree for everyone. But I was like that. I didn't cook at all until quarter life crisis. Okay. We didn't even talk about the story. I picked up and moved to Australia. Like that was my crisis.
Oh.
Like, you know what? I'm unhappy. I was 23 living in LA, still working in fantasy football, but I wasn't, with all that I've done in fantasy football since I was like 14 on. I still wasn't at the point of my career. And by the way, I was 23. Like, who cares? Like, I had the rest of my life, right?
Yeah.
But to me, it was the end of the world. And I wasn't at the point of my career where I wanted to be. I wasn't talking to the right people, meeting the right people. So it's like, okay, like I'm just going to quit this. I'm just going to one-way ticket myself to Australia, play poker there, and just have a life there and live in the other side of the country, or in the world, whatever. And so I happened to move into a flat. I met someone on their version of Craigslist. It's called Gumtree. And it was a 4-bedroom flat. The other 3 roommates were all going to culinary school to be chefs. And so then I naturally got roped into their energy and their pastimes, which were like taking what they learned in class and bringing it back and cooking with each other. So I got roped into that. And so I learned to cook, and my passion for cooking to this day came from them and my quarter life crisis.
So you basically got like free cooking school being around these 3 aspiring chefs.
Yeah, and we would do like games where blindfold and taste test, or like, hey, lottery was fun. You go to the grocery store and you could only buy proteins and sides that were on sale. And so you just didn't know what you were going to start with, but you still had to make a whole meal for the house with the sale items. And that way we could all save money too. And so, yeah, we would do just lots of different games where we'd teach each other different things.
You guys were just basically playing Chopped, but in your flat, essentially.
Gloria, Stephen, and Lee, and John Daigle. Yeah, all of us. One New Zealand, one from Malaysia, one just Australian. Just, yeah, it was all of us. And then one Texan.
Eclectic bunch.
Yeah.
So this next question, it might be dated by the time this episode even comes out, but Joey Wright wants to ask who should win on Saturday, Omega or Okada?
I am an Omega guy. I still want the Golden Lovers to get. I don't know if you understand this reference at all, but I would love
I know some of these words.
Okay. I'm still a Golden Lovers like biggest fan. And so if somehow we could connect the storyline there, although they probably won't, that would be great. But I personally, Joey, if you're listening, am an Omega guy. Also, I just respect the sport of wrestling. So whatever happens, I know it's going to be amazing.
Unfortunately, my wrestling fandom finished with the Attitude Era.
Everyone's did.
It feels like it. Like I rewatched the Vince McMahon documentary that's on Netflix, which was, I mean, just wild.
Which also like doesn't reignite your passion. Like it shows you how disgusting that human being was.
Yeah, it made me go like, all right, well maybe I'm not gonna get into it. My wife, she was like, "You watched this when you were a kid?" I was like, yes.
Everyone did, first of all. And it was amazing. Like, we didn't comprehend anything that was going on behind the scenes. It was incredible. That's when they also like hid dirt sheets. You could find them if you wanted to online, but for the most part, they hid dirt sheets so the storyline seemed real. And like a lot of people, like you were one example where they just got out whenever WCW intruded, and that's okay. I also got out around that time, but then I came back. I'm the other example when CM Punk had the pipe bomb and it made ESPN see it made CNN. I remember seeing it on news.
Oh, wow.
And then I was like, wait, what is this? Like CM Punk just kind of stole the mic and did something live when he wasn't supposed to. And that got me back into it back in 2011. And now we're in 2025 and I still watch religiously, sadly.
I don't know if I'm a big movie guy. I don't know if you've seen the new Street Fighter movie that they're casting. It's been like a bunch of wrestlers. I've seen like Cody Rhodes is going to be in it as well. Like there's a bunch of these guys.
I don't know anything about it, but I do know it can't possibly be worse than the first Street Fighter. That I know for sure.
Probably not. This one's going to be a personal one. Chris Allen asked, "Did you get your sink fixed?"
This is such a stupid question. Why'd you bring this to the mailbag?
It is a stupid question. I just really wanted to say it.
Chris Allen showed up to stay at my place. Like I said, I had friends down for the panel and just coming to Chicago. Rich Rebar was the other one. Came around. We all went to the Cubs game together. It was a lot of fun catching up with them. But he came in, and it just so happened that was the day also my sink fixed. Thus, I have no running water at the house. So, like, we have no drinking water because I can't filter it out into the pitcher. And to answer Chris's question, it was not fixed. I had started adapting and drinking from the sink, the bathroom sink that happened to be working, but no filter. And I got sick and realized, okay, I can't, like, I'm 37. I can't be doing this. Like, I'm living in hostels all over again. So
Yeah.
I stopped adapting and I got an appointment. Yes, it's fixed now, Chris. You're welcome.
There you go, Chris. Now Chris is just going to show up at your place tomorrow looking for water.
Well, we have water now.
Last question on here from Bingles on Blue Sky asking, waffles or pancakes?
I'm going to say waffles, but in the back of all of our heads, we have like our favorite dishes that we've ever eaten, like stashed in there. And one of the top 5 meals of my entire life, I still remember, it were pancakes with berry compote at an Australian cafe called Two Birds, One Stone that I still follow on Instagram to this day, if only because their pancakes changed my life. They made them cylinder, but like they had buoyancy. Like you could push them down, they pushed back spongy. Up. Yeah, but not spongy, like a cake. Bao.
It wasn't like that.
Like bao, kind of dough. So it was
interesting.
It was glorious. Like I would go back just for that dish. So that's one of my favorite dishes, but I'm still going to take waffles over pancakes in America every time.
I'm just going to throw this out here. Option C, French toast. French toast slaps.
The only thing about French toast is that I will take it normal, but if you get it stuffed, it's always too much. It's too much sugar. It's too big. There's just too much stuff going on with it.
Yeah, I'm not trying to do all that. By the way, judging by your taste so far in food, have you done a Korean bakery?
I'm thinking, I don't think I have.
That needs to be the next thing you do.
What is a popular dish that I can get at a Korean bakery? I will find one like this week. Because that's how I kind of start my day, by the way. Like I make my own cold brew. I steep my own cold brew. But honestly, I like to start my day with like a walk to any kind of cafe and just get a cold brew there. But then I also order a treat if you tell me what to order.
So they have this breakfast bread that they call it. It's it's called a dongle, which I don't quite know how that works.
Interesting.
But it's basically like a soft, almost like a Hawaiian roll type substance that has like some jam and like a cream cheese in it. They do a lot of really like puff pastries. I know the one we've gone to has these cakes that I think maybe the entire cake feels like the same density as one slice of regular cake here in the US. It is just this light, fluffy, airy thing. It's amazing. I'm not doing it justice here, but it's one of those things my wife found, and every year we get our birthday cakes from the Korean bakery.
I just need your reassurance that if I walk in and ask for a dongle, they won't laugh at me. Like that's the real word.
I hope that's the real word. If not, I've sent you.
Well, you don't sound too confident.
No, now I'm worried. I'm going to have to Google this and let you know after the show.
Google it and send it to me because I will go find one for sure.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, John, this has been awesome. Like having you here, just getting to know you a little bit more, hearing all about your philosophies with fantasy football, the way you look at the game has definitely helped me learn more. I know it's going to help the audience learn a little bit more. What I'd love to do here to finish this off, man, is just tell everybody what you're working on and where they can find you.
At Dagel on Twitter. and we are expanding our season-long product now that this is my second year at Establish the Run. We're coming on, and we had a full off season to think about what we can do to not only expand my side, but to help everyone out even more. So we're probably going to start doing a lot more on Instagram as well. If you want to go to Establish the Run and not Dagel on Instagram, not to mention Silva just texted me on Monday, unfortunately, and said, hey, we got to put the first team previews up by Friday. So the team previews are about to start rolling out there. And from then on, it's going to be the tiers that everyone loves, rankings. My favorite is the default, exploiting the default ranking series, which is saying, like Sleeper, for example, these guys are way too low or way too high. The ADP is not correct. Please don't go in looking just at ADP. Take this list and understand you will get these values. And that's just not for Sleeper. That's for Yahoo, everywhere else. So all of that stuff that everyone loves that we did not talk about on this show, instead talked about cocktails in the world. We will be coming out with that Establish the Run basically beginning next week.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do, is just find those little like cheat codes in the ADP.
Because the ADP is so horrifically bad. It is so bad.
And it's just so different for
remember,
each site too.
The interface doesn't get touched all year long. So of course it's bad. It's just based on last year's points. And again, you don't get last year's points.
Yeah, you mentioned a player earlier, Kyle Williams on the New England Patriots. I remember I hopped into a rookie draft, and his ADP, he was just pushed so far down the list. It was just such a cheat code when you were hopping into these rookie drafts for Dynasty.
I had such a hard time on any rookie drafts on MFL because like I was scrolling way down for players. Like I can't even find this guy.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a bunch of guys you have to like write in their names, or you draft a kicker and then like on the side add a comment. It's rough out there sometimes.
Yeah.
But John, thank you so much for joining me, man. It's been such a pleasure to have you. I know we went a little long here, but I appreciate you taking the time. And for everybody watching or listening, as always, thank you for joining us, and I'll see you next time. Adios.